The press conference for the highly anticipated fight between Tank Davis and Lamont Roach was supposed to be just another routine event. The usual back and forth trash talk, some jabs to hype up the fight, and a little bit of tension to sell tickets. But what actually went down was far from what anyone expected. Tank Davis completely lost control during the face-off with Roach, turning the event into pure chaos. His emotions boiled over, and before anyone knew it, security had to rush in to prevent things from escalating further. What was supposed to be a standard press conference turned into a viral spectacle, with fans and media buzzing about the intensity of the exchange. The fight was no longer just about boxing. It was about personal grudges, revenge, and the stakes of Tank's career. Let's take a deeper look at the chaos that unfolded and why this fight is much bigger than what anyone initially thought. Entering the press conference, the tension in the room was already palpable. Lamont Roach had been talking a big game in the lead-up to the event. He wasn't afraid of Tank Davis. In fact, he was coming into the fight with the mindset that he could shock the world. Roach had been hearing all the talk about how this fight was pointless, how Tank should be facing bigger names, and how Roach was just another stepping stone for Tank's legacy. But Roach wasn't having any of it. He wasn't there to be a pawn in Tank's career, he was there to prove that he belonged. Roach had been waiting for this moment for years. He had lost to Tank multiple times in the amateurs, but this time was different. He believed that he had improved significantly since their last encounters, and that this time he would be the one coming out on top. But when Tank Davis and Lamont Roach finally faced off, all the trash talk became a reality. The second Tank got in Roach's face. The energy in the room shifted. It wasn't just the usual mind games and banter that come with a press conference. No, this was something more. Tank's emotions were on full display as he stared down Roach. It wasn't just words anymore. Tank looked like he was ready to throw hands right then and there. Roach didn't flinch, though. He stood his ground, staring Tank down with the same intensity, as if daring him to take the first swing. The two fighters stood locked in an almost tangible standoff, each one waiting for the other to make a move. And then, as if the tension couldn't get any thicker, Tank lunged at Roach, and security had to jump in and separate them before things could escalate any further. The room was left in shock as the chaos unfolded, and the intensity between the two fighters was undeniable. This wasn't just a fight between two boxers, it was personal. Tank Davis and Lamont Roach had history. They had fought multiple times in the amateurs, with Tank coming out on top each time. In fact, their rivalry had started years ago, with their first encounter taking place in the regionals. Roach had been convinced he had won, but a controversial point deduction left Tank the victor. The two then met again in the nationals, with Tank winning yet again in a close fight. Roach had been waiting for this moment for years, waiting for the chance to finally get his revenge. He had spent years watching Tank climb the ranks, becoming one of the most feared and respected fighters in the world, while Roach remained in his shadow, still struggling to make a name for himself. Roach was hungry for this win, convinced that he had grown as a fighter and that he was now ready to take down Tank. But was it enough? Tank, on the other hand, was a different fighter than the one Roach had faced in the past. His rise in boxing had been nothing short of meteoric. Tank had become one of the most dangerous and respected fighters in the sport, knocking out elite opponents and winning titles at the highest level. He had proven time and time again that he was one of the best in the world. But now, with the looming specter of retirement hanging over him, Tank seemed different. People were starting to wonder, did Tank still have the same fire that had driven him to greatness? Or was he just going through the motions? Tank had already publicly stated that he was retiring after 2025, and many people wondered if this was going to affect his performance in the ring. Would he still be the same Tank Davis that knocked out opponents with brutal precision, or would he be a fighter on the decline, just coasting through the motions until his career came to an end? These were the questions that lingered over the fight. And it wasn't just Tank's retirement plans that were getting attention. The media had already begun to speculate that this fight was a mismatch. The narrative was that Tank was taking an easy route, picking Lamont Roach as an opponent because he was a smaller name and not a serious threat. Fans and pundits alike were calling it a payday for Tank, a fight that wouldn't really test his skills and would just be another stepping stone in his career. But Roach wasn't having it. He was tired of people writing him off. He knew that he had the skill set to go toe-to-toe with Tank, and he was ready to prove it to the world. Roach's confidence was at an all-time high, and the pressure was on Tank to prove that he was still the top dog in the sport. Meanwhile, Tank's future was constantly being called into question. Would he face bigger names like Shocker Stevenson or Devin Haney, who were seen as the top challengers in the division? Or would he continue on his current path, facing opponents like Roach who were seen as lesser competition? Tank's decision to fight Roach, instead of taking on one of these more high-profile fights, was being heavily scrutinized. Critics were questioning whether Tank still had the hunger to take on the best, or if he was content with taking easy fights and retiring before he faced any real challenges. The narrative surrounding Tank's retirement only added fuel to the fire. Fans and analysts alike were left wondering if this fight would be the last test of Tank's career and if he would go out with a bang or fade away into mediocrity. While the media and fans focused on the drama surrounding Tank's career, Roach was focused on one thing, proving that he was more than just a stepping stone. He had been underestimated his whole life, and now he had the chance to make people pay attention. Roach had been preparing for this moment for years. He had trained tirelessly, watching his past fights with Tank over and over, studying every mistake, every opportunity he had missed. Roach was convinced that he had what it took to win this time. His experience in the amateurs, his training regimen, and his newfound confidence were all coming together at the perfect time. But even with all the preparation in the world, there was one thing that no one could overlook: Tank's knockout power. Tank had become known for his ability to end fights in an instant. It didn't matter how skilled his opponents were, Tank had the power to change the course of a fight with a single punch. This is what made the fight so intriguing. Roach might be the more skilled fighter, the one with the technical edge, but Tank's power was the ultimate game changer. If Roach could survive the early rounds and avoid getting caught by Tank's devastating punches, then maybe he had a shot at outboxing him and dragging the fight into the later rounds. But that was a big if. Tank had finished opponents faster than anyone had anticipated, and Roach knew that one mistake could be the difference between victory and defeat. This fight had the potential to be much more than a simple showcase of power versus technique. It was a clash of two fighters at different points in their careers, each with something to prove. And then there was the rising star in the sport, Kean Davis. If there's one thing that could take this fight to the next level, it's the fact that Kean Davis has been calling out Tank for years. Davis, who had been steadily climbing the ranks, had made no secret of his desire to fight Tank and prove that he was the future of boxing. Davis was everything Roach wasn't: fast, skilled, and full of confidence. He had already shown that he could hang with the best in the division, and his cocky attitude had made him a fan favorite. But what made this even more interesting was the fact that Davis had been working with Floyd Mayweather, Tank's former mentor and longtime rival. The beef between Tank and Floyd had been well documented, and now it seemed that Davis was the one who would carry the torch for Floyd, trying to dethrone Tank once and for all. The thought of a future fight between Tank and Kean Davis was enough to send the boxing world into a frenzy. It wasn't just about the fighters anymore, it was about the drama, the beef, and the personal stakes. Tank had spent years under Floyd's shadow, learning from him and growing into the fighter he was today. But now, with Floyd supporting Davis, it seemed like Tank's former mentor had turned his back on him. If Tank and Davis ever fought, it wouldn't just be about a title or legacy, it would be about sending a message to Floyd. Tank would have to prove that he was still the king, that he was still the fighter to beat. And if Davis could pull off the upset, he would not only take Tank's crown, but also the mantle that Floyd had once held in the sport. As the fight between Tank and Roach nears, the stakes couldn't be higher. Tank is on the verge of retirement, Roach is hungry for revenge, and the future of boxing is watching. Will Tank prove he's still the fighter he once was, or will Roach pull off the biggest upset in recent memory? Only time will tell, but one thing's for sure, this fight is far from just another payday for Tank Davis. It's a battle for respect, legacy, and the future of the sport itself. So what do you think? Will Tank defend his legacy, or is Roach ready to rewrite the story? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell to stay up to date with all the latest updates on this epic showdown. We'll be back with more soon. Stay tuned.